Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 10th February 2021. In this video, we'll be discussing this couple of issues. We all know that a glacial break is suspected to have caused the flash floods in Uttarakhand's Chamoli district. This happened on Sunday, and we have discussed an editorial on this yesterday as well. In this context, in last October itself, the National Disaster Management Authority, which is headed by the PM, has issued certain guidelines on how to reduce and deal with disasters caused by what is called as the glacial lake outburst flood. But according to the experts in this region, they believe that this is not a glacial lake outburst flood, but it is rather an incident of snow avalanche, because this area is generally very steep, and glacial lake outburst floods are not so common in these type of areas. So glacial lakes are formed when the glaciers get heated up, and they carry debris along with them downslope. So when this debris get deposited on the banks of certain water bodies that we're talking about, they form a natural sort of a lake. But over a period of time, this becomes very weak because of the slope, and then this dam or natural barrier that has been built by this debris brought down by the glacier melt will collapse. This will lead to the flooding of water in the region surrounding that region. So this is the glacial lake outburst flood. But this time, the experts believe that it is not a case of glacial lake outburst flood, but rather a case of avalanche, as we have already discussed. So this is a very significant event, given the fact that we have nearly 1,000 glaciers in Uttarakhand region, which have been feeding all the perennial rivers time and again for centuries and millennia together. When glaciers retreat due to rising temperatures, the snow melts, but the debris remains. However, in Sikkim, this is much more frequent than in the case of Uttarakhand, because of the steep slopes that we see in Uttarakhand. Even the National Remote Sensing Center survey said that there are around 3 lakh glacial lakes and 1393 water bodies together in our country, especially in the Indus, Ganga, and Brahmaputra basins. In this context, we have to understand that there are nearly 28 river valleys in the Himalayan region. If all these 28 valleys are obstructed by dam construction, we'll have one of the highest densities of dams across the world, and this will only worsen the situation in the case of events like this. So keeping these points in mind, last year NDMA came up with certain recommendations. Obviously, the first one is to identify all of them and create a database of these lakes. The second recommendation is about using synthetic aperture radar, and this imagery will automatically detect changes in water bodies, including new lake formations. So the next method or the next recommendation given by NDMA with respect to this is to develop methods for remote monitoring of lake bodies from space, because it is not possible for human intervention in very sensitive areas like this. We can't have manned stations in these regions and observe the changes in the water bodies. Therefore, this type of remote interventions become all the more important, and for this we require support from ISRO. The next one is about reducing the volume of water with methods such as controlled breaching, pumping, and making a tunnel. So from time to time, flood check should be happening. That is the basic logic here. The next point is about land usage policies, which will regulate indiscriminate usage of land because of the natural vulnerability of this region. There are a lot of landslides happening in this region. Himalayan ecosystem is one of the youngest ecosystem in the region, and it is tectonically still unstable. So providing a quick reaction in case of any sort of a disaster also becomes an important part of the policy. So medical help and training required for medical help is the next aspect of the policy. So assessing the risk is only a part of the problem, but the real problem is not taking enough precautions. So even in this regard, NDMA has given certain guidelines as to how we have to deal with glacial lakes. The first one is about creating an early warning system and a broad framework for infrastructure development in this vulnerable zone. The second one is about restricting the constructions in this region, because wherever we have this glacial lake outburst flood, the population is at an all-time risk. It is very unpredictable. So there is every possibility that all the habitations in that region will get washed away in the event like this, as we have seen day before yesterday. So deploying comprehensive alarming systems is always a requirement, even in the case where already constructions have already happened, or alternatively the government should take a strong policy stance that they will evacuate people from that region and provide them alternative livelihoods or alternative habitations, because it is an all time disaster if another event like this happens in a mega scale. So this is the precautions that we have to take while understanding the risks involved, and the solution for this is following the National Disaster Management Plan, wherein both structural as well as non-structural measures are listed out. Structural measures include constructions of certain barriers which can stop the damage, but it is really the non-structural measures which will have a real-time impact. It is about the behavioral of people, the policies of the government which discourages such unsustainable activities in this region. We have to focus on this non-structural measures first to have any sort of a change. We have to plan better and mitigate these kind of disasters in the future. That is the gist of this article. This article is about a sovereign rating upgrade. In economic survey, there was a criticism upon sovereign rating agencies that despite India never having defaulted on payments of its interest or the loans that it has taken, or basically the debt, India was always given a negative outlook or lower than what it actually deserved. So this time economic survey said that we have to go towards FRBM target breach and towards capital expenditure to ensure that we are growing than more normal times because of the COVID pandemic. So to the uninitiated, FRBM target mandates that the government fix itself to a certain percentage of GDP as fiscal deficit, that is 3% by 2022. But this target has been breached time and again, and the new target is to contain the fiscal deficit by 4.5% by 2025. In this context, this article talks about what we have to actually do to get this sovereign rating upgrade despite having all the negativity around it. But before that, we have to understand why sovereign rating really matters to India. Because investment comes into India only after they look at this ratings. Consider it like a movie review. If a movie has a positive review, it definitely helps its collections. Similarly, if economy has positive sovereign ratings, it will help more and more investments come into our country. And this FRBM target breach has been cited as one of the reasons as to why India is not a favorable investment destination by these sovereign rating agencies. Apart from this fiscal deficit, there are other parameters like GDP, HDI, etc., which equally matter in factors of production. Say, for example, labor, we are talking about access to capital. All these factors will equally be important in deciding a credit rating. Now, if you take a look at this credit rating agency's parameters, we can say that there is an overemphasis on FRBM targets, tax to GDP, and all the macroeconomic parameters of an economy. The social indicators, which are equally important, are often overlooked by a lot of analysts because they feel that these kind of changes are not really possible in short term. Given the state of pandemic, given the problems that we have, like in the case of HDI, we have severe problems like malnutrition, we have problems like lack of access to education, lack of access to healthcare, which will equally impact the labor development in our country. All these factors taken into consideration, what we must actually do is ensure that whatever expenditure that we are incurring on capital here in this budget should be invested in such a way that they have a multiplier effect on these social indicators as well. We have to divest our resources in such a way that health, education, malnutrition, and other social indicators which indicate a happy society should be equally be taken care of. When there is a stable policy certainty and at the same time a happy society, it is a very conducive place for doing a business. So therefore, India should focus on these parameters in the next few years and not worry about its sovereign ratings, because usually this sovereign ratings take a few years for an upgrade or a downgrade. Given the pandemic, they indeed have downgraded our economic status, but in the future, if these social indicators are taken care of, automatically it will reflect in our sovereign ratings as well. That is the gist of this article.